Hello and welcome to the program. I'm your host, Neal Howard. Thank you for joining us today on Health Professional Radio. In the past several weeks, shootings took place against police officers, and in the aftermath of that, it was discovered that the shooters had military experience. Now, in that same time period, USA Today released a story that back a couple of years ago, in 2014, there were 20 veteran suicides per day. So basically, no matter how you look at it, it might seem that vets and military members may not be receiving the treatment and care that they need, particularly when it comes to life-threatening and life-altering PTSD. Our guest in studio today is author of the new novel, A Soldier's Son, and decorated Vietnam veteran Jack Estes. He's here in studio to discuss with us living with PTSD and what needs to be done from a veteran standpoint to fully heal when it comes to PTSD. Welcome to Health Professional Radio, Jack.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for your service.
You bet.
Yeah. You're a decorated Vietnam veteran. The Vietnam War, highly controversial, as are all wars, when you boil it right down. The Vietnam War in particular, what was it that led you to the military in the first place?
Well, I was attending college, and I was flunking out of college, and I had no job. I certainly didn't have a family that provided any support, and my girlfriend was pregnant. So we got together and tried to figure out what we could do, and so I decided that I would join the Marine Corps. We made that decision together, and at least the Marine Corps would be able to pay for my, it was my girlfriend, and we eventually got married, but pay for our baby's birth. So I really didn't know much about the Vietnam War, to tell you the truth. I didn't know what we were fighting for. I didn't even know where Vietnam was. So that's really what happened and how I ended up in the Marines and in Vietnam. I was only 18, and most of my I'd say extracurricular time was involved in sports, although I was involved in speech and theater as well.
So you find yourself in boot, you graduate boot, and then you find yourself in country. You're seeing things that you never thought you'd see. Like you say, you never even knew where Vietnam was. You didn't know what you were fighting for, but you're damn sure fighting. And you're seeing things, you're experiencing things, you're forming relationships. Talk about some of the what was going on in your mind as an 18, 19-year-old dropped into this situation.
Well, first of all, boot camp does not prepare you psychologically for the impact of war. And when we got off the plane, I was shocked to see a guy standing there with a scout dog strapped with a .45 eating an ice cream bar and at the airport. And so that was kind of a shock, of course. And then the first night spending in a 2 or 3 story building that was for the people coming into Vietnam and the people that were rotating home or going on R&R. And that night we got hit and we're running down to down the stairs and to get outside to a trench line, and somebody screams, "Effing rockets." And I'd never heard that term. It wasn't, we weren't told or taught about rockets. Artillery is one thing, but to receive rockets was extremely frightening to me. And then a couple of days later, when I was walking back from the mess hall, a rocket actually hit the mess hall. Mostly it was vacant. Hardly anyone was in there, but the people that were in there, some of them were killed and maimed, disfigured. And that was very shocking because I'd only been in country for just a very few days.
Yeah. Man, traumatic to say the least. So are these things that you try to become used to, these experiences, or is it something that you thought you may have become used to and, I guess, desensitized until certain problems started? What was it that caused you to realize that you had some things to deal with as far as coping?
Well, I think mostly you don't worry about coping.
Mhm.
You're not thinking about coping. You're just trying to stay alive.
Yeah.
And of course, there are numerous events that happen along the way, from your first firefight to the first time you see someone killed to the first time you kill someone.
Yeah.
Those are all, amazing events. And one of the things that was probably the event that turned my way of thinking was when I lived in a village with a combined action platoon for my last 6 months in Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
and it consisted of 10 Marines and Navy corpsmen and 15 to 20 popular force soldiers. And our job was to train the soldiers, which were really civilians, so that they could help protect themselves. And one day there was a lot of contact. Several of the cap units were being hit hard, and we went over to help another cap unit and some Army personnel that came down from a base that was maybe a mile away. And there were people that were trapped out in the middle of the rice paddy. My friend and I went out to try to help a corpsman who was severely wounded. And during that time, my friend was shot 4 times. I ran out of battle dressings, so I tied his arm together, his shattered arm together with my sock. And other people were wounded, and the corpsman that we were trying to help was wounded again. And, my friend is saying, "Go home with my body." So once I got him back to the rear, I just had, I'm not sure what they call it. I had a break, and I was just so angry and upset because he was wounded, and I thought that he was going to die. And that after that moment, I became flat. And he lived and was medevac, but I can tell from that moment that I had changed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't feel that fear anymore.
Yeah.
I felt nothing.
And it's interesting. You say you felt nothing. We often hear about post-traumatic stress disorder. We hear the clinical definition of it, or we hear from it from a healthcare provider, or maybe we're hearing about it from a family member who's concerned about one of us. But what is PTSD to you? From a decorated Vietnam veteran's point of view, what is post-traumatic stress disorder?
Well, first of all, anyone that serves in combat will have post-traumatic stress.
Okay.
And the thing that makes it horrible is when it becomes a disorder, and where that stress affects your life in a negative way. Now, for me, being flat was in one way good because I wouldn't panic at all, and it was like I didn't care about anything. The problem is you bring that home,
mm-hmm.
and remember, I was married. I came home, I was still 19 and had a child, and that was in August of '69.
Mm-hmm.
And by November, my wife had left me because I was uncaring, unfeeling. I had no empathy for anyone, and that carried on for a large part of my life. I've been married to a different woman now for 35 years, and but she's been seminal in helping me heal.
Yeah.
And there are phases of post-traumatic stress. It certainly there were for me. I had, you know, a great deal of violence. The first year we were married, to Colleen, I was married to Colleen, my second wife. I was thrown in jail 3 times.
The first year.
And you know, I would have probably the biggest thing that was finally diagnosed about me was that I had survivor guilt. I felt guilty about being alive. I used to hope that I would be walking down the street and someone would do a drive-by shooting so I could get wounded more severely so people could see that I was hurt. And it was hard to see that I was hurt inside, but if I had a leg missing, well, that would be better. So those are just some of the things about post-traumatic stress and how it impacted on me.
Now, you're an author. You're the author of a new novel called A Soldier's Son. You've also done some other works, A Field of Innocence, a highly critically acclaimed memoir that recounted some of your experience in Vietnam, some of the ones that we're talking about now. Now, as the author of this new book, I'm sure that writing is well, maybe therapeutic for you. I mean, I'll go out on a limb and say, yeah, I'll speak for you and say it's probably therapeutic in your writing. But you mentioned having no empathy, not caring. How do you start the conversation with a healthcare provider? How do you start the conversation and let them know that, hey, I need help because I don't care about you or anyone else or myself, and I'm really guilty that I even survived the combat? How do you get that conversation started in an effective way so that you can get the help that you need?
Mm-hmm. I think it's a long process to get from, to get through the pain relative to post-traumatic stress disorder. But the thing that you want to do is reveal rather than conceal. And that way you can move through the pain and move through healing. And it isn't an overnight thing. It isn't seeing a therapist once or twice. You know, I've seen multiple therapists over the years and you know, have gone to therapy and to rap groups and different things like that, you know, over 100 times easily over these last, years. Mm-hmm. And I don't think a veteran that has PTSD is in any position to analyze his problems. That's what you're sitting there with a therapist, and the therapist needs to move gently and often slowly. I was afraid that when I first started seeing therapists that they would think that I was totally crazy if I told them what some of the thoughts I had were. And of course, they were violent and horrific. And the other thing about being a veteran with PTSD is you think that you're the only one that could think this kind of thought. Mm-hmm. And then you feel bad for thinking about it. And that's why many veterans move towards self-medication, whether it's alcohol or drugs or whatever. Mm-hmm. There's just a whole litany of, symptomatic behavior that veterans have, and it changes from one to the other. Another big issue with veterans is they miss the adrenaline surge. Do you know what it's like to put on your magazines, your flak jacket, they call it body armor now, and pick
full
up your
battle rattle.
rifle and go out beyond the perimeter, or to do that at night? And that kind of adrenaline surge, the kind of adrenaline surge that can keep you up easily for 24, 36 hours or more. Well, your body misses it and your mind misses it when you come back home. And that's why you see a lot of veterans hurt themselves in motorcycle wrecks and do things that are quite dangerous.
Where can our listeners get a copy of your new novel, A Soldier's Son? It deals with a Vietnam veteran trying to help his son who's in Iraq. Where can we get a copy of this brand new novel?
Well, first of all, you can go to Amazon.com and order it there. You can go to Kindle. You can go to Barnes & Noble. There are many places that you can order. And that's your local bookstore will probably carry it. It's also the distribution is handled through Ingram Sparks. So just tell your bookstore that you can buy it through Ingram Sparks, which means if you buy it, if a bookstore buys, a number of copies of the books and some of them don't sell, then they can send those back.
All right. Well, Jack, it's been a pleasure talking with you today. I'm hoping that you'll come back and talk with us in other segments. Not only are you an author, but you're also the founder of the Fallen Warriors Foundation. Hoping you'll come back in future segments and talk a little bit more about getting veterans the help they need to deal with PTSD.
Thank you.
Thank you. Transcripts and audio of this program are available at healthprofessionalradio.com.au and also at hpr.fm. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. I'm your host, Neal Howard. You've been listening to Health Professional Radio.